Okay, so today we are officially 10 whole years removed from the release of the official Five Nights at Freddy's. 11 mainline games, a spin-off, a kart racing game, and 4 troll games later, the original is still the best. When you really think about it, every Scott-made Click Team FNAF game up until UCN was rushed in some way. Scott as a game developer is good at hiding the fact that his games can be rushed for the most part, but they kind of were. Not that it completely writes off or undermines the mainline series just because of that. This is just to provide a base for this theory. The intervals, movement opportunities, sprites, and individual images for animatronics in certain places make the cracks start to show. Various times, parts of animatronics' limbs are clipping through the vents. There's nothing to stop the wyverns from jumbo whamming you, and Harder Nights giving you no time to wind up the music box. Even though back in the olden days, Scott would only go from a few months to a year before releasing a new game, most of the time they were in good shape, at least in terms of playability. But Five Nights at Freddy's was different. Scott had made dozens of games and projects to try to put his foot in the door of game development. Some good, some bad, and some just plain right underappreciated. But one thing was the same. None of his other games really took off. Scott worked at a Dollar General to support his family. Then, as we all know by now, when he saw a hate comment for his game Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., which compared his sprites to creepy animatronics,
you may notice the dead, terrifying, soulless eyes of the background characters.
That gave him an idea. This idea would prove to probably be his best idea ever. FNAF 1 was made in 6 months with his only playtesters being his sons and his friends. Despite this relatively small amount of time, Five Nights at Freddy's is one of the most consistently unnerving and scary games to come back to, even still in 2024. In Five Nights at Freddy's, you are limited to just sitting in an office, not being able to move. This was actually just a limitation of Click Team Fusion, the engine Scott used to make FNAF 1, but it proves to work in the favor of this game. Every piece of the game, from the animatronics to the lighting in the rooms to the posters which give us our first little scrap of lore in this game, is executed pretty much perfectly. This game is probably the best sound design out of any game I have ever played. Everything from the footsteps, to the building ambience, to the power generator, to the classic all blend together perfectly and make this a terrifying audio and visual experience. There's a whole video someone made about the sound design of FNAF 1 and how it is absolutely amazing, but I've said all I wanted to say about that aspect of it. Now, I can't pretend that after an entire decade and dozens of replays that this game is still anything heart attack inducing or anything, but what I can say is when this game first came out, I almost had nightmares. Whenever I do go back to this game, still, and my intention is to just speed through it because I know all the ropes at this point, this game still continues to unnerve me. It builds tension incredibly well, while being also mostly skill-based. Of course, there is RNG with pretty much every FNAF game, especially in this game, with how long the animatronics stay at your door, or when Foxy runs out your door and how much power all of them take, or how long Freddy is going to stay to camera even when watched. But once you catch on to all the mechanics and how the animatronics work, you can beat FNAF 1 pretty easily. I personally don't start dying unless I get too cocky or just forget about too much until about night 3 or 4. This game still gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like I've mentioned with the movement limitations, or the little posters most people won't even catch, this game does so much with so little. The lore in this game is so bare bones, but even still executed perfectly. The design, feel, and vibe of this game is a perfect what the hell happened to this place. But what makes this game stand out all above the rest? There are probably still bugs somewhere in FNAF 1. Technically all the games are the same but different, sometimes a lot different and sometimes not much different at all. The thing is, FNAF 1 is the blueprint. Every fan game ever made, every Scott made FNAF game, every Stewwool made FNAF game, all started with this. The phone guy, the whole concept of Five Nights at Freddy's, movement limitations, it all started with the original game. Maybe you're saying something like, oh, but the later games offer so much more. Yeah, sure, they do. But the more you go on into the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, the more the lore gets intentionally convoluted to both keep people playing and keep money rolling in, which is fine, because without some sort of lore, there's really nothing to worry about in a FNAF game. Now, is there? And obviously the lore is an intriguing part of the story that people enjoy, it's just that, really when you come down to it, it doesn't affect the gameplay all that much. It's simple, not intensely convoluted with the complex concept you really have to dive into. That is why Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is still the best, in my opinion. Ultimately, though, it's up to you to decide what FNAF game you think is best. Happy 10 years, happy 10 years, happy 10th anniversary to Five Nights at Freddy's, and thank you, Scott.